My name is Valerie Walker, and at 32, I thought I understood the rhythms of Pumice Heights Hospital in Ash Valley, Washington. As the lead administrative coordinator for the cardiac unit, I'd spent 6 years navigating the complex web of schedules, budgets, and personnel that kept our department running smoothly. The Pacific Northwest rain drummed against the windows of my third-floor office most mornings, creating a steady backdrop to the controlled chaos of hospital life. Pumice Heights prided itself on being a beacon of medical excellence in our small mountain community. The hospital's reputation drew patients from across the region, and our cardiac unit was particularly renowned. I managed everything from staff scheduling to budget allocations, ensuring our nurses and technicians had what they needed to provide exceptional care. It was demanding work, but I found satisfaction in the precision it required. Monica Peterson had been our head cardiac nurse for 3 years when I first noticed the discrepancies. Small things, really, shift differential payments that didn't quite align with the schedules I'd approved, weekend premiums that seemed slightly inflated. Monica was meticulous about documentation, always the first to submit her timesheets and staffing requests. Her attention to detail was one of the reasons Dr. Harrison, our department chief, relied on her so heavily. The employee referral program had been my initiative, launched 8 months earlier to address our chronic staffing shortages. For every qualified candidate we successfully hired, the referring employee received a $1,000 bonus. It was working beautifully. We'd brought in 12 new team members, and morale was higher than it had been in years. Monica had been particularly enthusiastic about the program, submitting several referrals that had resulted in excellent hires. But lately, something felt off in the careful balance I'd worked so hard to maintain. The numbers weren't adding up the way they should. Payroll discrepancies that were just small enough to avoid immediate attention, but consistent enough to create a pattern. I'd started keeping a private spreadsheet, tracking the anomalies that kept appearing in our financial reports. The morning I found the third unexplained referral bonus payment, the rain had stopped, leaving an unusual stillness in the air. Monica's latest referral, a cardiac technician named David Chen, had supposedly started 2 weeks ago, but I couldn't find any record of him in our system. No badge access logs, no orientation completion, no emergency contact information. It was as if he existed only in our payroll database. I stared at my computer screen, the cursor blinking in the search field where I'd typed his name for the 4th time. The silence in my office felt heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the ventilation system and the soft beeping of monitors from the unit beyond my door. Something was very wrong at Pumice Heights Hospital, and I was beginning to suspect that the person I trusted most might be at the center of it all. The investigation began quietly, the way most betrayals reveal themselves, through small inconsistencies that accumulate like sediment in still water. I started by pulling Monica's referral history from our HR database, cross-referencing each submission with actual employee records. The pattern emerged slowly, methodically, like developing film in a darkroom. Monica Peterson had been my most trusted colleague for 3 years. We'd worked together through the worst of the pandemic staffing crisis, coordinating shift differential payments and weekend premiums when our department was running on skeleton crews. She'd been the one to suggest the employee referral program expansion, arguing passionately in department meetings about the need to incentivize quality hires. Her enthusiasm had been infectious, and I'd championed the initiative to hospital administration, based largely on her recommendations. Now, sitting in my office at 6 a.m. before the day shift arrived, I traced the timeline of her referrals. 8 submissions over 6 months. 5 successful hires who were currently working excellent shifts, contributing meaningfully to our team. But 3 others, David Shen, Sarah Martinez, and Kevin Thompson, existed only as names in our payroll system, each generating a $1,000 referral bonus that had been deposited directly into Monica's account. The sophistication of the scheme was what struck me most. Monica hadn't simply invented names and submitted them randomly. She'd created complete application packages, resumes with believable work histories, references from hospitals in other states, even forged transcripts from nursing programs. The applications looked legitimate enough to pass initial HR screening, but the candidates had mysteriously withdrawn from the hiring process at the last moment, always citing personal circumstances or better offers elsewhere. I pulled up the Epic system logs, searching for any trace of these phantom employees. Nothing. No badge swipes, no system access attempts, no orientation modules completed. They were ghosts in our database, existing just long enough for the referral bonuses to process before vanishing entirely. The morning sun was beginning to filter through my office windows when Monica knocked on my door. She entered with her usual confident stride, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the cafeteria, our long-standing morning ritual. "You're here early," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Everything okay with the weekend staffing reports?" I accepted the coffee, studying her face for any sign of nervousness. Monica looked exactly as she always did, professional, composed, genuinely concerned about hospital operations. Her scrubs were perfectly pressed, her ID badge positioned precisely, her dark hair pulled back in the neat bun she'd worn every day for 3 years. "Actually, I wanted to ask you about some of your recent referrals," I said, keeping my voice casual. "David Chen, specifically. I'm trying to update our tracking spreadsheet, but I can't find his employee file." Monica's expression didn't change, but I caught the slightest pause before she responded. "Oh, David, that was disappointing. He accepted the position but then called HR the day before orientation to withdraw. Family emergency, I think. His mother was hospitalized back in Oregon." The lie was delivered smoothly, with just the right amount of regret. If I hadn't spent the morning reviewing the fabricated application materials, I might have believed her completely. "That's unfortunate," I said. "Did you know him personally before referring him?" "We worked together briefly at Seattle General about 4 years ago. He was always reliable, great with patients. I was surprised when he backed out, but you know how family situations can be." Another lie, delivered with the same practiced ease. I'd already verified that no David Chen had ever worked at Seattle General during the time frame Monica mentioned. Over the following weeks, I conducted my investigation carefully, methodically. I reached out to the nursing programs listed on the phantom applications, confirming that no students by those names had graduated in the specified years. I contacted the reference hospitals, discovering that the phone numbers provided led to disconnected lines or businesses unrelated to healthcare. The most damning came from the bank routing information. Monica had been clever about the application materials, but she'd made one crucial error. All 3 phantom referrals had listed the same emergency contact phone number, a number that traced back to a prepaid cell phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in Tacoma. I documented everything meticulously, building a case file that would be impossible to dismiss. Screenshots of the fraudulent applications, phone records, bank transaction logs showing the referral bonus payments. They painted a clear picture of systematic fraud that had cost the hospital $3,000 in illegitimate bonuses. But the financial loss wasn't what hurt most. It was the betrayal of trust, the realization that someone I'd considered a friend and ally had been systematically deceiving me for months. Monica had sat in my office countless times, discussing staffing challenges and budget constraints, knowing that she was actively stealing from the institution we both served. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. Monica had submitted another referral, a respiratory therapist named Jennifer Walsh, who claimed to have graduated from the University of Washington's program. I had already confirmed that no such person existed in their alumni database, but I decided to test Monica's reaction. "Great news about Jennifer Walsh," I said when Monica stopped by my office for our afternoon check-in. HR fast-tracked her application. She starts Monday. For the first time, Monica's composure cracked. A flash of panic crossed her face before she recovered. But it was enough to confirm what I already knew. That's wonderful," she said, her voice slightly strained. "I'm sure she'll be a great addition to the team. I'm looking to meeting her," I continued, watching Monica's reaction carefully. "Maybe you could introduce us during orientation?" "Of course," Monica said, but her hands were trembling slightly as she gathered her papers. "I should get back to the unit. Mrs. Patterson in room 314 needs her medication reconciliation completed." That evening, I made copies of all and secured them in my home safe. Tomorrow, I would have to report my findings to hospital administration, knowing that it would likely Monica's career and possibly result in criminal charges. The woman who had been my closest colleague, who had helped me navigate the complexities of hospital management, who had shared coffee and conversation with me nearly every morning for 3 years, had been systematically defrauding the institution we both served. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, watching the evening shift arrive for their 12-hour rotation. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. Inside those walls, Monica was probably completing her shift, caring for patients with the same dedication and skill she'd always shown. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. How could someone be so committed to patient care while simultaneously stealing from the hospital? The next morning, I requested a meeting with Dr. Harrison and Janet Morrison from Human Resources. As I walked toward the administrative wing, carrying the folder that contained months of careful investigation, I realized that everything was about to change. The comfortable routine Monica and I had built, the trust that had made our professional relationship so effective, the friendship that had sustained me through some of the most challenging periods of my career, all of it was about to. But as I knocked on Dr. Harrison's office door, I knew I had no choice. The coolant was clear, the betrayal was complete, and my responsibility to the hospital and our patients demanded that I expose the truth, no matter how much it hurt to do so. Dr. Harrison's office felt smaller than usual as I spread the documentation across his mahogany desk. Janet Morrison sat beside him, her expression growing increasingly grave as I walked them through each piece of the fraudulent applications, the forged signatures, the systematic theft of referral bonuses that had been occurring for over 18 months. "These are serious allegations, Valerie," Dr. Harrison said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the printouts from our HR system. "You're certain about the authenticity of this?" "I've triple-checked everything," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "The IP addresses, the timestamps, the signature comparisons, it all points to Monica Peterson. She's been using my employee ID to submit fake referral applications and collecting the bonuses herself." Janet Morrison made notes in her leather portfolio. "The financial impact appears to be substantial. We're looking at approximately $47,000 in fraudulent claims over the past year and a half." The weight of that number settled over the room like a heavy blanket. $47,000. Money that could have funded equipment upgrades, additional staffing, or patient care improvements. Instead, it had been systematically stolen by someone I had trusted implicitly. "We'll need to conduct a formal investigation," Dr. Harrison continued. "This will involve our internal audit team and likely external authorities given the financial scope. Are you prepared for what that means?" I nodded, though my stomach churned at the implications. "I understand there will be interviews, documentation reviews, possibly legal proceedings." "There's something else you should know," Janet said, consulting her notes. "Monica Peterson submitted her resignation this morning, effective immediately." The news hit me like a physical blow. She knew. Somehow, Monica had realized that her scheme was unraveling and had chosen to flee rather than face the consequences. The woman who had stood beside me through countless difficult shifts, who had helped me navigate hospital politics, who had been my closest professional ally, had abandoned ship the moment she sensed danger. "Did she provide any explanation for her sudden departure?" I asked. "Family emergency," Dr. Harrison replied grimly. "Very convenient timing." Over the next week, the investigation consumed my daily routine. Internal auditors combed through financial records while I provided detailed statements about my working relationship with Monica. The cardiac unit felt different without her presence. Conversations were more guarded, and I noticed colleagues watching me with a mixture of sympathy and wariness. It was during this difficult period that Catherine Williams from the Quality Assurance Department approached me. We had worked together on several patient safety initiatives, but had never been particularly close. She found me in the break room during my lunch hour, looking exhausted from another round of investigative interviews. "Valerie, I wanted you to know that what you did took courage," Catherine said, settling into the chair across from me. "I know this can't be easy." "Thank you," I replied, grateful for any show of support. "Some days I wonder if I should have handled it differently." Catherine shook her head firmly. "You did exactly what needed to be done. And you should know. You're not the only one who had concerns about Monica's activities." This revelation surprised me. "What do you mean?" "About 6 months ago, I noticed some irregularities in our referral tracking system. Nothing I could prove, but patterns that didn't make sense. When I tried to discuss it with Monica, she became very defensive and suggested I was overstepping my authority. The pieces began falling into place. Monica's defensive behavior, her reluctance to discuss certain administrative processes, her insistence on handling specific paperwork herself, it all made sense now. "Why didn't you report your suspicions?" I asked. Catherine's expression grew troubled. I didn't have concrete, and Monica was so well regarded. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I regret that now. Her admission provided some comfort, knowing that my instincts hadn't been entirely off base. But it also highlighted how effectively Monica had manipulated the trust and respect she had earned over years of dedicated service. The investigation moved swiftly once external auditors became involved. They discovered that Monica's scheme was even more sophisticated than I had initially realized. She had created false employee profiles in our system, complete with fabricated references and employment histories. The referral bonuses were just one component of a larger fraud that included overtime manipulation and expense account abuse. 2 weeks after my initial report, Dr. Harrison called me back to his office. This time, Detective Sarah Chen from the Ash Valley Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit was present, along with representatives from the hospital's legal team. "Ms. Walker, we want to thank you for your cooperation throughout this investigation," Detective Chen began. "Your documentation and testimony have been instrumental in building our case against Monica Peterson." "Have you located her?" I asked. "She's been arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The you provided was crucial in obtaining the warrant. The news should have brought relief, but instead I felt a profound sadness. The Monica I had known, the dedicated nurse who stayed late to comfort anxious patients, who brought homemade cookies to share with the night shift, who had mentored new employees with genuine care, that person had been real. But so had the calculating fraudster who had stolen from our hospital and betrayed my trust. There's one more thing," Dr. Harrison added. "The hospital board has asked me to commend you for your integrity and professionalism throughout this difficult situation. Your actions have helped us identify serious vulnerabilities in our financial systems." As I left the meeting, I realized that the hardest part wasn't over. The criminal case would take months to resolve, and I would likely be called to testify. The cardiac unit would need to rebuild its culture of trust, and I would have to find a way to move, knowing that someone I had considered a friend had been deceiving me for years. But walking through the hospital corridors that afternoon, I noticed something different. Colleagues who had seemed distant during the investigation now offered genuine smiles and words of support. The atmosphere felt cleaner somehow, as if a hidden poison had been extracted from our professional environment. The betrayal had been devastating, but exposing it had been necessary. As I prepared for the long road ahead, I knew that justice would eventually be served, and our hospital would emerge stronger from this crisis. 18 months later, I stood in the conference room of Cascade Medical Center, watching as the last attendees filed out after our quarterly ethics training session. The whistleblower protection program I had developed was now being implemented across 3 hospital systems in Washington state, and today's presentation had gone better than I could have hoped. My new role as Director of Financial Compliance had been challenging but rewarding. After Monica's conviction, she received 4 years in prison and was ordered to pay full restitution. Pumice Heights had offered me a promotion to stay, but I needed a fresh start, somewhere I could rebuild my faith in the profession I loved without the constant reminders of betrayal. "Excellent presentation, Valerie," said Dr. Amanda Richardson, Cascade's Chief Medical Officer, as she approached my table. "The board is thrilled with the response we're getting from staff. They feel empowered to report concerns without fear of retaliation." I smiled, organizing my materials. That was always the goal. Healthcare workers shouldn't have to choose between their careers and doing what's right. The program I had created included anonymous reporting systems, mandatory financial ethics training, and most importantly, legal protections for employees who reported misconduct. It had grown from my painful experience with Monica, but it represented something positive, a way to prevent others from experiencing the same betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Jacob Martinez, who had become the new cardiac unit supervisor at Pumice Heights. "Thought you'd want to know. We just received our cleanest financial audit in 5 years. The new protocols you suggested are working perfectly." I had maintained friendships with several colleagues from my old hospital, and it was gratifying to hear that the changes implemented after Monica's arrest were making a real difference. The employee referral system had been completely overhauled, with multiple verification steps and regular audits. The shift differential payment process now required dual authorization and monthly reconciliation. As I packed my laptop, I reflected on how much had changed. The naive trust I had once placed in colleagues had been replaced by something more mature, a professional respect that didn't require blind faith. I had learned to verify, to question, and to document, but without becoming cynical or suspicious of everyone around me. The criminal trial had been difficult. Testifying against Monica, watching her in handcuffs, seeing the pain in her family's faces, none of it had brought me joy. But justice had been served, and the hospital industry was safer because of it. Monica's scheme had been more extensive than anyone initially realized, involving not just employee referral fraud, but also manipulation of overtime records and vendor kickbacks. My work now focused on prevention rather than punishment. The whistleblower protection programs I developed emphasized education, early intervention, and creating cultures where ethical behavior was rewarded and misconduct was quickly identified and addressed. Walking to my car in the evening light, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The betrayal had changed me, certainly, but it had also led me to work that felt meaningful and important. I was protecting other healthcare workers from experiencing what I had endured and ensuring that patients received care in environments built on integrity rather than deception. The silence in my car as I drove home was comfortable now, no longer filled with the anxiety and suspicion that had plagued me during those dark months of investigation. I had found my purpose in the aftermath of betrayal, transforming pain into protection for others. It was finally over, and the silence felt earned.